Some months ago, Ginny Buckley drove the prototype Noble M10. Back then, the car had Ford's 1.8-litre Zetec engine, and we concluded that the little sports car showed a great deal of promise. Lee Noble promised us a V6 version, and that the production M10 would impress us even more. And it does. External changes are minimal. Mostly they add a touch of aggression with spoilers at the front and back, but the biggest changes are reserved for under here. So it's out with the old 1.8-litre Zetec engine to be replaced by Ford's 2.5-litre V6 Duratec engine. And that means 170 brake horsepower in a car that was never exactly slow in the first place. And it's a good job that that engine is so compact, because behind it there's still enough room left for what is quite a substantial boot. And I'd say there's about room in there for you and the other half suitcases if you set off for a nice weekend in your natty sports car. What else does one do? Of course, if we're going to do that sports car thing, let's do it properly. We need the wind in our hair feeling, and it's not difficult here. 2 catches and a flip, and that's it. Don't let anybody try and impress you ever again by saying, oh, our automatic hood mechanism takes only 10 seconds. It takes about 1.5 seconds with this thing. And then we come to the interior. There have been major changes in here, but you've got to bear in mind it is a handmade, custom-built car, so it can be to your exact specifications. If you want wood and leather everywhere, that's what you get. If it's vinyl and lino that does it for you, then that's what you can have as well. But overall, it feels very well made, very well put together, and actually pretty upmarket in here. It's comfortable, spacious, and feels very solid. And then we get to the best bit, the drive-in bit. Ooh. Pull away, and the first impression is that it feels quite docile. The clutch is actually quite light and feels really, if anything, rather pedestrian. But bury that long travel throttle and all of a sudden you hear the V6 bellow, and then it really gets going. With 170 brake horsepower, there are more powerful cars on the road. But it's nothing to do with what's written on paper. The fast car is all to do with how it applies that power to the road. And in the case of the Noble M10, we've got the most delightful light steering, incredibly sensitive. It's real fingertip driving, even at high speeds. Every tiny little input is rewarded with a response from the car, and the car in turn talks back to you, feeding back through the steering every little bump. You've then got the joy, of course, of it having that mid-engine balance and rear-wheel drive configuration, which means you can absolutely balance it on the throttle through even the tightest of corners. This car is enormous fun to drive at silly speeds. The likes of Lotus had really better watch out. Now, you might be thinking that it's just another specialist sports car manufacturer trying to get a foothold in an already crowded marketplace, but there are some compelling reasons to consider the Noble M10. It's all in the details. For instance, the way the door shuts, with a satisfyingly expensive thunk. That's the kind of trick you might expect from Mercedes or BMW, but not from a small specialist sports car manufacturer, and yet there it is, music. And so the price, well, it'll set you back around about £34,000, which puts the M10 into very much Porsche Boxster territory. Having said that, with an anticipated annual production rate of between 50 to 100 M10s, you'll be guaranteed the kind of exclusivity that Porsche owners can really only dream about. And the M10 is more than practical enough to be used every day, which was Lee Noble's original brief to himself. In fact, Lee's only problem is that the potential buyer haven't heard of either him or his company. As for his car, well, no, that's more than good enough.
Here at the Weybridge factory, they're still building around 15 super blowers a year by the time-honoured craftsmanship, hand assembly and hand building methods. But at Aceke, the emphasis has switched very much to the new car, the Ace, the car that broke the company. It's a lovely looking car. It reminds me a bit of the AC 427 Frau convertible from the 60s. All the extras you'd expect for a car in this price range feels well screwed together too, and it gives enough go. Now, can't you just imagine yourself cruising down the seafront at Nice in this car? It's exactly the right image, it's the right sort of weather. Just take me to the ferry. Mind you, this is no boulevard cruiser. This car is fitted with the superblower engine we saw in the Cobra. You can have it in unsupercharged 5-litre form, or you can have it in 4.6 quad cam, the smoothest V8 around, which is designed for the new Mustang. And if you want to use it, the performance is there. 0 to 60 again, round about 5 seconds, maximum speed governed to 155 miles an hour. Back in the 1950s, when most cars on Britain's roads were of the Ford Pop or Morris Minor level of performance, Aceke Cars, one of Britain's oldest car manufacturers, came out with a jaw-droppingly beautiful sports car called the Ace, capable of 100 miles an hour. Now, the story of how Carroll Shelby subsequently shoehorned a fire-breathing Ford V8 into the chassis and created the brutal Cobra is the stuff of motoring legend. It's pretty much the mixture as before. Oh, I'm getting old. Take a big Ford V8, in this case the 5-litre supercharged 320 brake horsepower unit, slotted into the same old body and chassis, make it meet modern emission, noise and safety regulations, slap on a price tag of £70,000 and Bob's your uncle. But of course there's far more to it than that. They've spent a great deal of time and money refining the car over the original Cobra. The first 289s and 427s were real animals. You were driving them was like playing Russian roulette. You never knew when the bomb was going to go off. And if the Cobra did bite you, you knew it was going to be fatal. But that old Cobra trademark is still here in the superblower. And that's performance. 0 to 60 around 5 seconds. And maximum speed, well, when does your wig blow off and your false teeth fall out? It's still the best adrenaline pump that man has yet invented. Trouble with the AC original for me is the number of replicas on the market. Now, when any Tom, Dick or Harry can build a Sierra-based replica of this car for 12,000 quid, then spending 70,000 on the original starts to lose a bit of the charisma. Now, we promised you an exclusive treat, and here it is. The Aceke, the second of the pillars upon which the future wealth and prosperity of AC cars will be based. It's the front end of the Ace. The wheelbase is lengthened by 240 millimeters and designed by Ron Saunders, their chief designer. It's a coupe with aluminium body and a full 4-seater capacity. We first saw it at the motor show last year. That car was a non-runner. They've been working on it here at Byfleet, and now it definitely does run. And we're going to be the first British team allowed to drive it. Now, this, after all, is an engineering prototype, so one respects the factory. We're not going to go for ultimate performance figures, but with a 4-cam V8 developing 320 brake, AC estimate the 0 to 60 in around 5.5 seconds and a governed maximum of around 155 miles an hour. It's the sort of car that's designed for cruising across continents. Beautifully trimmed inside, as you'd expect. Lovely leatherwork, nice walnut, good instrument display, and all done in-house by AC themselves, which is quite surprising in these days when most components are bought out. Few shakes and rattles in this car, but as I say, you'd expect it in a prototype. And very good room for your mates in the back. It's difficult to form complete road impressions on such a short acquaintance, but very light steering. It feels extremely sure-footed with this width of rubber on the road. Nicely weighted steering, although at full lock with some tyre scrub that indicates they've got a bit of work to do on their steering geometry next. Borg Warner T45 gearbox with short throw, but they anticipate that when they get into production, automatics will be the preferred option. And in the crowded traffic conditions of Weybridge, it doesn't overheat, it doesn't fart and bang like a performance car. It's starting to show its true colours as a quiet, dignified, gentleman's high-speed carriage. At the back, under the smooth lines, a tailgate lifts to reveal substantial luggage accommodation. There really is room for your golf clubs in here, and on the production versions the seats will fold forward for more luggage capacity. Again, everything beautifully trimmed in suede and carpet. This is still very much a prototype. The tailgate will probably be a bit wider in production cars. Lovely shape. It reminds me of early Bristol 400s, aerodynamic contours, and no bad thing for that. Aceke say the car will sell for £70,000 when it's launched. They're already working on car number 2, and get your name down on the list, because they're only going to build initially about 1 a week. You always feel sorry for tiny little independent companies like this fighting for survival in a world dominated by the industry big boys. On the basis of our visit to Weybridge, the air of cheerful optimism is infectious, and if effort and commitment count for anything, they do deserve to succeed. Let's hope there's enough people out there ready to lay out their cash in a very good cause.
We couldn't possibly do a show looking at British sports car manufacturers without talking about TVR. And we couldn't possibly talk about TVR without looking at this, their latest offering. It's the Tuscan Speed 6. Seen here not for the first time perhaps, but certainly for the first time in full production guise. The Speed 6 refers to the glorious straight-six engine that's found ordinarily in the Cobra. But whereas, as in that monster, it can be a bit of a handful, shall we say, TVR reckon that in this, the Tuscan, it's far more, well, perhaps docile isn't the word, but more easily manageable. In fact, TVR reckon this is going to be a true grand tourer with plenty of room for people, not too challenging to drive, and even room for luggage. You may think that this looks a little bit too wild to take on the road, but 1,300 people certainly don't, because they've already got orders in for theirs at £39,500.
TVRs can never be said to be disappointing. Their outrageous styling is always matched by their outrageous performance and thrill-a-second handling. Now this is a sort of remodified Griffith really. It's called a Tuscan. It has a straight-six 4-litre engine, 360 brake horsepower. It'll cost you about £38,000. And that's as much as I know really, because that's all that TVR can be bothered to tell us. This is a very laid-back company.
This is the Ugly Duckling, the car that started the Marcos story. Back in 1959, racing driver Jem Marsh and aeronautical designer Frank Costin got together to produce this gull-wing coupe that swept all before it in club racing in those years, driven by people like Jackie Oliver and, believe it or not, Jackie Stewart. From this car, they moved on to the stunningly beautiful Adams-designed Marcos 1800. Came out at the 1961 motor show to almost universal press acclaim. And it's this car that set the pattern Marcos was to follow for the next 40 years. Those early Marcos designs, both the Racer and the 1800, were famous for their chassis. They were made of maroon ply, bonded into a monocoque. In fact, plywood was an excellent material, light, durable, rigid, and surprisingly good in a crash. It was time-consuming and labour-intensive to make, though, and in 1969 the company went over to a tubular space frame chassis with fiberglass body, a formula it's stuck to ever since. Marcos make all their own mouldings here in Westbury. even down to the construction of a new buck to take the body moulds from. This is the definition of a hand-built car. Paul here still does hand layup of all the glass fibre components. It's a time-consuming and extremely labour-intensive process, but it results in very high-quality mouldings. With such a low production volume, each car is almost individually made for the customer. Now, from the very first cars, Marcoses have always had fixed seats and the pedals and steering column move. And that means Mary here can build different variations of thickness of cushion for the seats, depending on the build of the customer. Since the first days of Marcos, they've been closely associated with racing. And 40 years later, no exception. In 1998, they started the Dunlop Marcos Challenge, a one-make series with control engines for all the participants, the 4.6-litre V8 ensuring extremely exciting racing. There's currently almost 20 cars competing in the British series and a similar number competing in Holland. Final assembly lines hardly look like Dagenham, but then they only need to turn out a couple of cars a week. Marcos can't tell you how many cars they've built over the 40 years, but they think it must be close to the 1,000 mark, and many of them are still on the road as sought-after classics. So the model lineup from Marcos now consists of the Manta Ray, the Mantis with the 4.6-litre Ford quad cam, supercharged if you want, engine from the Mustang, and finally the LM500 race car. Like many small companies that have to survive the British economy, Marcos have had their ups and downs over the years, sometimes looking decidedly shaky, but Jem Marsh is a survivor, and today the company's in better shape than it's ever been, with production running at a steady 2 a week, the order book full, and between 3 and 6 months wait if you decide you want one of these cars. In many ways, the Marcos story is the epitome of the British motor industry. Seems the only thing we're any good at is building sports cars.
How many enthusiasts out there would sell their mothers to drive a prototype race car before the car's gone into production? Imagine driving the Viper before the manager's decision to go ahead with a production car.
Or a new Lotus perhaps. This is the new Lotus Sport Elise, and tonight you'll see it moving for the first time on your TV, an exclusive. From the front you'll see it's got lots of aggression. This is a race car. The biggest difference you'll see of the body shell is this long curving roof. It takes you down nice and smooth to the very purposeful rear spoiler. And then we've got a squared off tail, all this adding to the aerodynamics that are required for a race version of the Elise. And under here is the gorgeous Lotus developed 1.8 200 brake horsepower development of the K-Series engine. It revs up to 9,000 RPM and it goes like a rocket. It's beautiful. And inside you can see it's a race car as well. It's a no compromise, lightweight construction race car, minimal dashboard. You've got the stack for the data login. The materials, aluminium, nicely welded up. That's the actual frame of the car, which is almost like the standard cars. Carbon fibre, very neat detailing where the handbrake would normally be. The surround for the gear change, nicely moulded carbon fibre. This is a no compromise race car, but beautifully done. If my touring car had ever looked this neat and tidy, I would have been very surprised. This has had a lot of thought put into it, and it's a credit to the engineers that have put it together. And this is still the development car. It's going to get better. We've got the fire extinguisher, a must for all smokers, and mandatory obviously. We've got the rollover bar here, safety devices roll cage, just in case a tree falls on you or you happen to turn the car over. Very nice. Can't find the stereo, can't find the heater. Don't think it's there, don't think we need it. car is straight out of the box. They've whacked a set of springs on it, they've whacked a set of dampers on it, they've got the wheels pointed roughly in the right direction, and if that's the case, this car is going to be bloody good, because to me, it's there already. Okay, a few tweaks on the dampers, a little bit of a tweak on the roll stiffness, and it definitely needs that, but beyond that, it's going to take this from a mega good car to something which is going to be probably the fastest one-make series in the UK. The TVR is going to be slightly quicker down the straights, but come the corner, a TVR will be buried its nose into the tarmac, hard on the brakes. This Elise, I think, will still have its foot down round the corner. Don't even touch the brakes. The grip and the handling are so good. It's going to reward the good driver. The good driver will be able to take what Lotus have put into it and develop it beyond that for individual circuits, for their individual style of driving. I've raced touring cars a lot. They're very satisfying when you get it right. But the actual enjoyment of driving a touring car for the sake of driving a touring car, just not there. They are not fun. It's got to be rear-wheel drive. It's got to be on slicks. And for me, it's got to be a Lotus. I'll be very interested in doing this championship next year. So there we have it. Lotus have put their vast racing heritage behind the development of this Elise. It's going to be a fantastic championship encompassing UK and Europe. Over 45 people have vying for the 25 positions that are available. Only 25 cars will be built for people coming up with 50 grand. And Lotus will sift out, not the people with the most money, but they'll sift out the best drivers, probably here at this test track at Texel. I should imagine we'll end up with quite a few cars on the road, Elises with these kits. No doubt the rear spoiler will find its way onto the back of quite a few road cars, and it's because it looks so good. They'll probably be grafted on the roof line as well.